In the spring of 1945, as Nazi Germany crumbled and the guns of war finally fell silent, Europe braced for a long-awaited peace. Crowds filled the streets celebrating the end of years of devastation. Yet, amidst the jubilation, Winston Churchill felt only a deep and growing dread. The grand alliance that had united Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union against Hitler was now beginning to fracture. With their common enemy defeated, old suspicions and new ambitions resurfaced, threatening the fragile unity that had held the Allies together. Churchill's gaze shifted eastward, his mind troubled by the intentions of Joseph Stalin and the Red Army's relentless advance into Eastern Europe. He saw not liberation, but the seeds of a new domination taking root. Soviet forces, instead of freeing nations, were imposing harsh new regimes, silencing opposition and crushing any hint of dissent. The promise of freedom was quickly being replaced by the reality of occupation. At Yalta, the Allies had pledged free elections and self-determination for countries like Poland. But now those promises were being ignored, replaced by Soviet control and manipulation. Churchill watched with alarm as the Red Army, millions strong and well-armed, entrenched itself deep within the heart of Europe. Their presence was no longer just a buffer, it was a direct threat to the continent's fragile security. While the West was eager to demobilize and return to normal life, the Soviets maintained a massive war machine, parading their strength and making no move to withdraw. Churchill feared that Stalin's ambitions might not stop at Eastern Europe. He worried that the Red Army could push all the way to the Atlantic, sweeping aside the weakened Western democracies. The war against fascism was ending, but in its place a new, more insidious conflict was beginning to take shape. A conflict that would soon be known as the Cold War. This was not the victory Churchill had envisioned. Instead of lasting peace, he saw the specter of another struggle looming on the horizon. The shadow of Soviet expansion loomed over every celebration, casting doubt and fear where there should have been only hope. From this anxiety and uncertainty, one of history's most audacious and secret military plans was born, an idea as bold as it was desperate. Operation Unthinkable would become Churchill's answer to the threat he saw rising in the East, a plan to confront the Soviets if diplomacy failed and to defend the freedom of Europe at any cost. In the shadows of victory, as the guns of World War II fell silent, Churchill began to contemplate a new and unsettling possibility. In secret, he ordered his most trusted planners to consider the unthinkable, preparing for a potential war with the Soviet Union, the very nation that had just helped defeat Nazi Germany. The plan, codenamed Operation Unthinkable, was split into two distinct parts, each more daring than the last. The first scenario was offensive, a bold, surprise Allied attack on Soviet forces stationed in Europe. The goal was to force Stalin to honor post-war agreements, especially those concerning the fate of Poland and the balance of power in Eastern Europe. The second scenario was defensive. What if the Soviets, emboldened by their victories, decided to invade Western Europe, threatening not just the continent but Britain itself? The planners had to imagine every possibility, no matter how grim. The very existence of this plan revealed Churchill's deep mistrust of Stalin and his growing conviction that only the threat of force could restrain Soviet ambitions. Publicly, Churchill continued to praise the wartime alliance, speaking of unity and shared sacrifice, but behind closed doors he was preparing for a possible and dramatic showdown with his former ally. Operation Unthinkable was far more than a theoretical exercise. It was a genuine exploration of military options, complete with detailed strategies, troop movements, and logistical challenges. The plan's secrecy and urgency underscored just how deep the rift between the Allies had become, even before the war had truly ended. Churchill was determined to be ready for any eventuality, even if it meant turning yesterday's allies into tomorrow's enemies, a decision that weighed heavily on his mind. The stakes were nothing less than the future of Europe itself, as the continent teetered between hope for peace and the threat of a new conflict. The world now stood on the edge of a new and dangerous era where old alliances could shatter overnight, and the fate of millions hung in the balance. The offensive plan aimed for a quick, decisive blow to force Stalin's hand. The Allies would strike across Germany and Poland, hoping to liberate Poland and show Western resolve. The plan called for 47 British and American divisions to launch a surprise assault near Dresden. The hope, shock and air superiority would break Soviet morale and force a settlement. But if the Soviets didn't fold, the war would escalate into a drawn-out, bloody conflict, one Britain could not sustain. Operation Unthinkable was a desperate gamble born of Churchill's fear of a Soviet-dominated Europe. Operation Unthinkable rested on risky assumptions. It depended entirely on full American support. Without the US, it was doomed. The plan even considered rearming German troops to fight the Soviets, a shocking reversal so soon after defeating the Nazis. Planners also worried about a possible Soviet-Japanese alliance, which could stretch Allied resources even thinner. The hope was that Polish forces in the West would join the fight, tipping the balance. But every link in this chain, American commitment, German rearmament, Polish support, was fragile. A single failure could unravel the entire plan. The operation's foundation was as unstable as the post-war world itself. The risks were enormous, and the outcome far from certain. When Churchill's planners delivered their report, the verdict was clear. The offensive was militarily impossible. The Red Army's numbers dwarfed the Allies, 264 Soviet divisions to just over 100 Allied, even with German units. The Soviets held a crushing advantage in tanks and artillery. Even a successful surprise attack wouldn't be decisive. The Soviets could retreat and regroup as they had before. Any war would become a long, brutal slog, one Britain, exhausted and broke, could not afford. The planners warned achieving a free Poland by force was a fantasy. The risks were catastrophic, the chances of success slim to none. The report killed the offensive plan before it could begin. Churchill's fears were real, but the means to confront them simply didn't exist. The cost would have been unimaginable. The Unthinkable report sparked a dramatic and unprecedented clash between Churchill and his top military commanders, setting the stage for one of the most tense debates of the post-war era. Churchill, haunted by the spectre of Soviet domination across Eastern Europe, was determined to take bold, decisive action before American troops withdrew from the continent. He feared that if the Allies did not act swiftly, the Soviets would tighten their grip, changing the balance of power for generations. But his military chiefs, led by the cautious and analytical Field Marshal Alan Brooke, saw only disaster in the cold, hard numbers and daunting logistics. They pored over reports calculating the immense risks and potential losses. While they respected Churchill's vision and his relentless drive, they simply could not endorse a plan they believed would end in catastrophic slaughter for British and Allied forces. American support was uncertain at best. President Truman was preoccupied with the war in Japan and focused on bringing American troops home as quickly as possible, leaving Britain isolated. Without the vital backing of the United States, the ambitious plan was effectively dead on arrival, with no hope of success. Churchill gazed at the grand chessboard of Europe, envisioning bold moves, but his generals saw only the grim reality. War-weary troops, depleted resources, and supply lines stretched to the breaking point. In the end, the military's sober and unflinching assessment prevailed, overriding Churchill's audacious hopes. Churchill's legendary audacity and vision met the hard, immovable limits of post-war exhaustion and military reality. The plan was quietly shelved, but the rift between political ambition and military reality was laid bare for all to see, leaving scars that would linger. This episode revealed the deep anxieties and uncertainties shaping the dawn of the Cold War as leaders grappled with a new and unpredictable world order. The world, still reeling from years of devastation, was simply not ready for another conflict. The longing for peace outweighed the appetite for risk. Did Stalin know about Operation Unthinkable? The Soviets had spies deep inside British intelligence, the infamous Cambridge Five. It's likely Moscow learned of the planning, if not every detail. For Stalin, this would have confirmed his suspicions of Western betrayal. The knowledge fueled his drive to secure a buffer of satellite states in Eastern Europe. Espionage and mistrust fed a spiral of paranoia on both sides. The seeds of the Cold War were sown in secrecy and suspicion. For decades, Operation Unthinkable was hidden from history, its files locked away. Only in 1998 were the documents declassified, revealing Churchill's secret plans. Yet the record is incomplete. Missing appendices, lost minutes, and unanswered questions remain. Some details may have been destroyed or simply lost in the chaos of war's end. The gaps remind us that history is often written from fragments. Operation Unthinkable challenges the myth of Allied unity and exposes the paranoia beneath the victory. The full truth may still be waiting in a forgotten archive. Operation Unthinkable was never executed, but its significance is profound. It marked the moment the West began to see the Soviet Union as the next enemy. The plan's defensive scenarios laid the groundwork for NATO and the doctrine of nuclear deterrence. The public image of Allied unity masked deep suspicion and rivalry. The seeds of the Cold War were planted before World War II had even ended. Operation Unthinkable bridges the gap between two global conflicts. Its logic, containment of Soviet power, became the West's guiding principle for decades. The first shot of the Cold War was fired in secret, in the minds of those who feared what victory might bring.